Om Vakratunda Mahakaya Surya Koti Samaprabha Nirvignam Kurume Deva Sarva Kareshu Sarvada Om Ganganapate Namaha Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. As we are moving further in our contemplation on the different yogic approaches, we have been further trying to explore the 9 forms of devotion. And these are, of course, in the Srimad Bhagavad Puran, and they are known as Navaratna Malika. The Navaratna Malika is the garland of 9 gems. How beautiful to put it this way, that the 9 types of devotion, 9 ways of connecting with God are beautifully described here. So just a little bit more background on the Navvidha Bhakti, the Navdha Bhakti as it is known. But first of all, Bhakti is love. But love towards God. That is basically the definition of Bhakti. Now, we could expand the definition in another way to simply say that it is just love for all. That is also another way of expressing Bhakti. I want to differentiate this. I want to kind of present this based on chapter 12 in the Bhagavad Gita, so that there is a clarification in my mind as well as in yours regarding the bhakti towards the manifested form of God versus the unmanifested form. So in chapter 12 in the Bhagavad Gita, there is a verse, and Arjuna is asking the question. The first verse in chapter 12, which is Bhakti Yoga, is like this: Arjuna uvacha evam satata yukta ye bhaktasvam paryupasate ye chapyaksharam avyaktam tesham ke yoga vittamaha. He's asking the question, which one is greater? Evam satata yukta. Those who are continuously, through steadfast meditation and prayer, are worshipping God, meaning you. He's saying that those devotees who worship you, the you there is Bhagwan Krishna or God in that sense, in a general sense, Bhagwan. Or are those greater who are worshipping the unmanifest, that is ye chapaksharam avyaktam. So it's ya cha api aksharam avyaktam. Now this word aksharam comes again and again in the Bhagavad Gita as well as many, many other scriptures. So the word akshar needs to be understood carefully. The word akshar is made out of 2 words, a and shar. The word kshar, K-S-H-A-R, means everything that is changing and perishable. This should be very clear. So everything that is changing and perishable is shar, and akshara is that which is imperishable. So from that definition, our Atma, the Jivatma, is Akshar in that sense. There is also the unmanifested Nirakar, formless aspect of God in the traditional Sanatana Dharma that is called Aksharam, and it is Avyakta. See, Arjuna himself is putting these 2 words here. Avyakta means unmanifest, invisible. Through our 5 senses, we see the world of Prakriti. The 5 senses are capturing the experience of the Prakriti. But that which is beyond the Indriyas, beyond the senses, is called Aksharam, and it is Avyaktam. Now, I'm giving this background here, presenting this background, so we can have that background as a foundation to understand Navdha Bhakti. Otherwise, this confusion may remain. So, it's a beautiful question, and it's a very practical question. See, in today's world, we go to so many temples, we go to churches, mosques, places of worship, gurudwaras, etc. There's no end to all those different lists of different religious places. And there is some concept of God, usually, in most of them. Maybe except for Buddhism, and maybe Jainism doesn't really have a concept of God. It's just the Atma. But still the Gurus are there, or the Buddha is there, Mahavir is there, like that. So, the question is about worship. See, evam satata yuktaye bhaktastvam paryupasate. Those who are your devotees, Paramatma, are they greater? Or the devotees, or those who are dedicated, those who are trying to move into the unmanifested reality without the devotion towards a form of God, manifested form of God. Whether it is an image, or whether it is a spiritual being manifested in human form, or God himself manifesting in human form. Himself or herself or itself. I hope this question is clear. It's a very, very significant question. Now this question is posed by Arjuna. Now look at the answers. There's a multiple series of answers here given in chapter 12, and then we will then get back to this 9 forms of devotion and how these answers connect to this. So Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Maya Vesha Manoe Mam Nitya Yukta Upasate Shraddhaya Parayopetas Teme Yuktatama Mataha. This is the answer given in verse number 2 in Bhagavad Gita by Sri Krishna Bhagavan, that one who continuously worships me, fixes his mind on me with supreme faith, I consider that individual or those people to be most devoted to me. So now look at the answer. He didn't really say which one is greater or less. He's giving the definition of a devotee in the answer. It's an interesting thing. That's why the Acharyas, Shankaracharya's commentary is significantly different from Ramanujacharya's commentary on this particular verse, because they are two different paths. You know, if you go to things like Buddhism, Jainism, J. Krishnamurti, and all those other non-theistic paths, they are trying to capture the unmanifest, the unknown, as Krishnamurti would say. And even those who are worshipping God as a means to an end, like in Advaita Vedanta, the bhakti is a means to an end. Again, that is an interpretation also from this. But the answer given by Sri Krishna in verse number 2 to Arjuna's question, he's not directly saying which is greater or less. Some people interpret this way. No, he actually said that bhakti is greater here. But if you look objectively, that is not what he said. He's simply saying that those who are eternally steadfast and who are worshipping me, who are in devotional practice and fixing their minds on God, continuously attaching their minds, Nitya Yukta Upasate. Nitya means eternally, Yukta means disciplined, steadfast. They're doing upasana. See, the word upasana is in here, upasate. It is a worship process. And so what he says here, Shraddhaya Parayopetas, and how are they doing that? With supreme faith. He's describing what is bhakti, how is to be done, and what is the state. He says that Teme Yuktatamam Mataha, that those who are doing that, those Yuktatamas, those most beloved disciples of God in that sense, they are most devoted. He's saying that these kinds of people are devotees and they are most devoted. He did not say in here that they are greater than those who are worshipping unmanifest. So let's be clear about that point. I'm trying to present this very objectively. And it is also being recorded for future reference and whatnot. Now if you go into verse number 3, the next verse, Sri Krishna Bhagavan says this. But he is clarifying some interesting points here. He says, Yetvaksharam manirdeshyam avyaktam paryupasate sarvatragam achintyam cha kutastam achalam dhruvam. But those who honor the unmanifest, the imperishable, the indefinable, the all-pervading, the unthinkable, the unchanging, the immovable, and the eternal. So he's describing what is that unmanifest. These are all ways of describing the unmanifest as imperishable, indefinable, unmanifest, all-pervading, sarvatragam, achintyam, cannot be thought about. Mind can never touch that. And eternal, kutastam means eternally, unchangingly fixed. Achalam, immovable, that is present all the time. These are ways of describing the unmanifested reality. And dhruvam means eternal or constant. Achalam means unmoving, immovable, and dhruvam means fixed. These are ways of describing the unmanifested reality. Now you will see where this 9 forms of devotion intersect with this answer in chapter number 12. It's very, very interesting. So now in verse number 4, look at what he says here. Very interesting. He says, Samniyam indriyat, ek second. Samniyam mendriyam gramam sarvatra samabuddhaya. Samniyam mendriya gramam sarvatra samabuddhaya. Te prapnuvanti mameva sarvabhute hite rataha. So he's now describing for the second path, where those who are just manifesting and honoring and worshipping the unmanifest, like pure Advaita Vedanta, J. Krishnamurti's approach, even Buddhism we can say, Jainism we can say, like many sects in Hinduism are on this type. Many paths are of this type, that they're not interested in any sakar form of God, any form of God, or God as such as something different from who they are. Right? So in that situation, how is it that they can attain the supreme reality or can attain God, attain Bhagwan? So now what is interesting here, he says samniyamendriya gramam. That means taking all the indriyas, the 5 sense organs and the karma indriyas, the entire mind-body complex. And he says sarvatra samabuddhaya. See this quality. To reach the unmanifest, the buddhi, meaning what, our intelligence, becomes samatva, meaning what, even-mindedness, impartiality, disinterestedness, dispassionateness, and indifference. Whatever may happen in the world, whole world might blow apart or it might turn into a heaven, that such a yogi, it's all equal. Such a yogi is insulted millions of times or praised billions of times, equal. Sarvatra samabuddhaya. What a state! My God, if you try to realize what this might even be, what a state of evolution of the mind. Samniyam indriya gramam, meaning that bringing all of the indriyas into interconnection, into control in some sense, subduing it. There's one way of thinking about it, but without the reactionary effect. I would like to interpret that more as all coming together, rather than a control, like a suppressing control, not that kind. Sarvatra samabuddhaya. Whatever is there, plants, animals, trees, rich people, old people, dying people, born people, everything that is going on in the sansar, the sarvatra samabuddhaya. This is verse number 4, chapter 12, Bhagavad Gita. Extraordinary. And then he says here in the third part of that verse, Te prapnuvanti mam eva. That those who have these states of mind and qualities and this type of realization, they also come to me. Sarvabhuta hite rataha. They come to me. Now that's the real controversial point between Shankaracharya and many of the other acharyas. What is that me? Is that the unmanifested Brahman only? Is that the same thing as God, or is God beyond that? So that's some discussion about, is God beyond that unmanifested state of just the one without a second? We'll talk about that some other time. But what he is saying here, the way that this is written, he's saying there that they do come to me. So Sri Krishna is saying, God is saying, they will eventually come to me. So now, many of the Bhakti Acharyas, Ramanujacharya, Vallabhacharya, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, etc., Bhagwan Swaminarayan, all of these individuals who have come, who are devotionally oriented, they will take these verses and they will say that this path of trying to realize the Paramatma without upasana of the sakar form, without upasana of the manifested form, is extremely difficult, as per verse number 5, the next verse. The next verse says, Klesho dikatarastesham avyakta sakta chetasam avyakta hi gatir dukkham deha vadbhiravapyate. To try to connect with the unmanifest, the strain, the trouble of those whose minds are fixed on the unmanifest is greater. The mind cannot think of something which is beyond itself. How is the mind supposed to connect with something that it has never even thought about? So what Sri Krishna Bhagwan in verse number 5 in Bhagavad Gita is directly explaining this point, that there is going to be trouble. There's going to be trouble in the sense there's going to be a lot of difficulty in this. because the mind is trying to evolve into something that it has never seen before. And this happened in the life of J. Krishnamurti. We go through his notebook of J. Krishnamurti. He used to wake up shouting and screaming at night time because his mind is going beyond its limitations into the unknown. So there's no latching on to any idea of God. So that is why that is exactly what is described in number 12, verse number 5. The trouble of those whose minds are fixed on the unmanifest is greater. It is more difficult. The path is much more difficult to go straight into the unmanifest rather than to do the 9 forms of devotion as shown in the Srimad Bhagavatam. When Sri Krishna is saying that those who are eternally devoted to me, as we saw in verse number 2, he says, he says there that he says that Maya Veshamano Imam Nitya Yukta Upasate Shraddhaya Parayopita Steme Yukta Tamamata. Those who are devoted to me, the way of doing the devotion is explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam in these 9 forms. So this approach is shown here. Now, again, there's no doubt he has shown this other path of the unmanifest. But look at the criteria. I just want to repeat that criteria for my own remembrance again. That Sarvatra Samabuddhayaha, Samniyam Indriya Gramam, total equanimity, total balance. There's no agitation. Not only that, there's no agitation because of any ego reaction. Whatever may be happening in the world, the person is not touched by that. By anything, absolutely A to Z that is going on in this world, such an individual is not at all concerned about it. What is state? Is there anybody like that? There are people, no doubt, but then we have to go into what that might mean for practical purposes. For practical purposes, that path is not advisable for people living in the world. The path of bhakti is advisable, not the path of the unmanifest. One tries to do that, there will be strain in that, and not only that, the ability to live in the world becomes much more difficult in many, many ways. But nonetheless, it is there. That's the beauty of the Bhagavad Gita. Everything is shown in its proper light. So Sri Krishna then also says in chapter number 12, verse number 6, the next verse, he says, Ye tu sarvani karmani mai sanyasya matparaha anannenaiva yogena mam dhyayanta upasate. He says, but those who, renouncing all actions and in me, now he is talking about the practical. See that he's given these 2 paths, now he's actually pulled it together. Fascinating how this is done. He's pulled it together and says, all right, both of these tend to be difficult, no doubt, in some way. So he says, you know what? Take all actions you perform. Renounce them in me. See? Yetu sarvani karmani. All actions. Eating, drinking, moving, doing this, doing that. Every action we're doing, you just offer it to me and you give it to me. You don't hang on to it. So for example, Sachin is talking about this right now. This 1 hour satsang that we do, Sachin thinks, oh, okay, Sachin is doing that. Immediately I'm gone. As soon as that thought comes, everything becomes zero. That's the danger of this. So when we offer the satsang back to God, anything we do, we offer back to God. We drink water, offer it to God. Everything, driving a car, offer it to God. Walking from point A to point B, offer that to Paramatma. Offer everything. So this thing that he's talking about, Yetu Sarvani Karmani, actually that is this number 9 here, Atma Nivedanam. So in this verse number 6 of chapter 12, when he says Yetu Sarvani Karmani Mai Sanyasya Matparaha, that is actually the 9th form right there, leading straight to the 10th. So every action is offered to God, Mai Sanyasya Matparaha, meaning what? That offering it to me with the mindset of a sannyasi. Sannyasi means renunciation. I'm not holding on to anything. The moment we hold on to anything, we are in the body consciousness. Now practically we hold on to bank accounts and name and property, and these are the functional things only. But internally there's no holding on to anything. This is what Sri Krishna is saying. And he says, Mai sanyasya matparaha. Matparaha means what? That the abandoning of the holding on with the intention of realizing the highest reality, the highest conscious. Mat paraha means the intent on me as the highest. That I am the highest, meaning God is the highest. That intention. Otherwise, we have million intentions in life. We are learning after sexuality and money and position and million things. We're the sense objects and building bigger mansions and doing. God knows what is going on in the sansar. It just goes on. And everybody, whoever is in the sansar, 99.999% just stay in the sansar. The Brahma Vidya of Bhagavad Gita is there for those who want out of the sansar. It is not for those who just want to remain in the sansar. I mean, it is to some extent. There's some applicable things. But in the reality, in its pure sense, look at what he's saying. Yetu sarvani karma. He's not saying offer just some karmas to me. He said everything. 100% offering of every karma to Sri Krishna, to God, Bhagavan. And then he says, Ananya naiva yogena. This is all number 6 shloka. That Ananya means there's no other distraction going away from the attention on Paramatma. And that is yoga. Ananya naiva yogena. Yogena meaning by yoga, with connection of the various ways. It says, Mam dhyayanta upasate. That he is able to worship me. He worships me undistractedly. That meditating on me. Meaning what now? The me can be interpreted in 2 different ways. One is the manifested form of Bhagavan Sri Krishna or Shiva or any manifested form. Different gurus. You can think of it that way also. Some people interpret that way. God is present in the Sadguru. That's one way. Another way is to interpret the me as the Brahman. That is the Shankaracharya's commentary would be on that. And he has written an extensive commentary on the Bhagavad Gita. So when he says that, Mam dhyayanta upasate, that means that the upasana, the worship process, now this is where this Navda Bhakti comes into play. The upasana, the word upasate means upasana is referring to the process of worship, those who worship. Upasate meaning they who worship Bhagavan. Those who are trying to worship Bhagavan in an undistracted way by renouncing all their actions to get to this state of worshipping. This is again a description of the state. When one does this, then one realizes God. Now, how to do it? So Srimad Bhagavatam is that scripture that is showing the devotional aspects of how this is done. And this is where these 9 forms of devotion really come into play. And we were talking about Shravanam. So what we just did right now, we looked at 6 shlokas, the first 6 shlokas from the Srimad Bhagavad Gita chapter number 12. And to do so, to try to understand the basis behind these 9 forms of devotion. So when we are worshipping God in Sakar form, as a Murti of Sri Krishna, Murti of Shiva, or an image of a particular Sadguru that we may be in love with, any such thing, and by listening to the glories and the teachings and ideas, all of that is in this 9 forms. So Shravan is the first part of that. Now we'll go to the very quickly, we'll touch upon Kirtanam and then we'll go into it in more depth next time. See, the word Kirtan is praying. Kirtan, but it also has to do with the mantra repetition of different sound syllables, like, or the names of God, the names of the Lord. Now, why is that beneficial? What does that do? So this Kirtan Bhakti, it is a way of inducing a natural high. There's a lot of neurology behind it. In fact, there's a book called How God Changes the Brain. And in there, this is described. That the Kirtan Bhakti awakens all kinds of energies within and purifies the mind. And there are, of course, mystical experiences of seeing Krishna or, in the dreams and those kinds of things. Whatever you are connecting with, you're going to be connected with that in some way or another, and that will come to you in the dreams. Or even while you're awake, those thoughts will come. Psychologically speaking, it is a technique. Kirtan Bhakti is a technique to purify the mind and to bring about the purity of emotion into divine emotion, Divya Bhav. All of these 9 forms have only one goal, that is to take the emotional system we have, clean it up, purify it, and bring out from within it only divine emotion, the bhavas. That is the point here. There's so much more to be said. There's no end to all of these things anyway. So we'll continue talking about this next time, about Kirtan Bhakti in much more detail. But that was some of the background to connect with. What is the two different paths, the manifest versus the unmanifest? What did Sri Krishna say up to slok number 6? In number 6 shlok, he really clinched it by really saying, you know what, both of these are difficult. This is just my interpretation. The unmanifest and manifest are difficult. You just leave everything to me. He says that again and again, Sarva Dharman Paritaja. How a human being can get to that Sarvatra Samay Buddhaya? Is there anybody like that? Good Lord, somebody says 2 words to us and we are boiling up and down our emotions. We were nowhere near that state. Not even anywhere close to that. Something changes here and there, some financial thing changes here and there. Immediately there's no possibility of that thing. Unless one is to 100% evolved to that level. So better approach is to say, whatever I'm doing, I'm offering it to you. I'm not holding the responsibility for it. We can do this. This is understandable at least. These other things are not understandable that much for the common human mind. The notion of renouncing everything is so straightforward that whatever I'm doing, I'm just giving it to you, oh Lord. I don't know, I'm a child. I don't know anything. Sometimes the problem in all this Gyan and Vedanta and so many things, isme ahankar bahut aa jata hai. We think we're some Gyani and we know something. But the beauty of the devotee is a child. He says, I don't know anything. I'm just at your feet. And with that feeling, there is just so much bhakti bhav. There is a conviction that this is God. That is called Nishtha, Swarup Nishtha, which we will talk about next time. Otherwise, this can go on for the next 10 hours. So let's move on from here and continue our satsang.